What is SonarQube? SonarQube is a platform that is used for code quality analysis. As we know, developers commit their codes to GitHub. They commit their source codes, build scripts, and unit test cases to GitHub. Now, typically, for Java-based projects, Maven is used to do the build. Now, in doing a build, Maven does some things, right? Maven does validation, compilation, testing before carrying out a build. Now, if this is done, why do we need to do a test again using SonarQube? Now, we should understand something. When Maven does a build, and test in particular, it tests unit tests cases that are available. So if there is no unit test cases available, it tests 0. Okay, so how does SonarQube come in? SonarQube's important feature is that of code coverage. There are several features relating to SonarQube. There are certain qualities, right, that a good commit must have. A good commit must have high code coverage, right? What is high code coverage? High code coverage relates to the proportion of unit test cases to the total codes written. So when developers write codes, they're expected to write unit test cases for each line of code, right? So if a developer, for example, writes 100 lines of codes, they're expected to have 100 unit test cases. So what it means is that if a developer writes 50 test cases for 100 source codes, raw codes, it means there's a 50% code coverage. 50% code coverage. Now, with Maven, the unit test cases determine the tests that are carried out. So if there are no unit test cases, it means there will be no tests carried out, right? And in that case, when there's 0 tests, it means there is nothing to fail. So quality gate will be passed. Now that we've established that, so we see that SonarQube is important because of that. Now, aside that, there are other qualities that a good commit must have. They include readability, portability, absence of vulnerabilities, and reliabilities. Now, we've looked at 5, right? So let's look at each of these, right? We've talked about high code coverage. As much as possible, we want to encourage developers to provide as many unit test cases as possible, as many. So the higher, the better. So if a developer writes 100 lines of codes, we expect that they should have as many as 90, 95 depending, right? Depending on this benchmark set within the organization. Because all these qualities that we've mentioned are those that will determine the quality of the project. Okay, now, in terms of readability, we should encourage developers to review and remove all code smells from their work. There should be no code smells, right? So there should be no bugs. Also, we can talk about portability. In terms of portability, we are looking at being able to, for a code, for a project to be implemented in different environments, we should encourage developers to write codes that will survive any environment. How can this happen? This will happen only where developers do not add code. Developers should be encouraged not to add code at all, right? They should be, their codes should be variable, right? There should be no add coding as much as possible. Also, when you talk about absence of vulnerabilities, developers should make sure security is paramount when coding so that they can limit all threats and vulnerabilities. Also, when you look at reliability, you want to encourage developers to ensure that their codes don't have bugs so that the project remains always reliable. Because when there are bugs in the code, right? When there are bugs, then the functionality will be minimized. And as much as possible, you want to minimize duplications in the code. So these are key things we should always bear in mind when looking at SonarQube, because at the end of the day, they will determine the benchmarks that will be set, right? Because for SonarQube, benchmarks are set to determine whether a code will pass, a project will pass the quality gates. So these benchmarks will need to be set. Now, there are certain characteristics of SonarQube. SonarQube has a scanner. SonarQube has a compute engine. SonarQube has Elasticsearch. SonarQube has web server, and SonarQube has database. So let's look at each of these one after the other. What does the scanner do? The scanner allows for input to be passed into the SonarQube platform. What about compute engine? Now, we are talking about code quality analysis. When we talk about code quality analysis, computations need to be done, right? We are looking at code coverage, that's computation. We are checking for bugs, right? That's computation. So it is the compute engine within the SonarQube that makes this possible. Now, for Elasticsearch, right? We are looking at lines of code that could vary from 1,000, could vary from any number to a very large number, right? So there's no limit. So with the Elasticsearch within SonarQube, it enables SonarQube to search through all the codes from start to finish, regardless of the size. Now, when you talk about web server, right? Web server makes it possible for users to interact using the web platform, that's the website. You can have a web-based platform with SonarQube. Now, What about the database? Now, data are generated, right? When reports are generated, data are generated. SonarQube has the database where all reports, where all data are stored, right? That's the database. Now, we want to get started with SonarQube. We want to launch SonarQube. Launching SonarQube, let's see. What do we need to launch SonarQube? To launch SonarQube, we want to go to AWS, and launch SonarQube. Let's launch an instance. So what do we need for SonarQube? For SonarQube, we need a minimum of 4 gig RAM. So in this case, we'll be going for a T2 medium. T2 medium, okay? Red Hat T2 medium instance, okay? Red Hat T2 medium instance. T2 medium. Okay. I want to select my key pair. I have an existing key pair. And I want to make sure I open port 9000 alongside the default port that is already open. That's the SSH port 22. I also open port 9000. So I'm adding a security group rule. I do not want to choose existing security group, so that this will be clear, especially if you are doing this for the first time. Okay. So I want to select 0.0.0.0/0. Okay. Now that I've done this, I want to launch this instance, right? I only want one instance, so I'm launching this instance. So while it's still initializing, I believe we can get started. So I need my public IP address. I'll be using mobile X10. So let's start a new session. I'm pasting the public IP address. I'm specifying the username, EC2-user. Port 22 should be open, and I want to pick my private key. Pick my private key. Okay. So, okay, it's connected. So, to install this SonarQube, we'll be using a script. We'll be using a script to install SonarQube. Remember that we make sure we open port 9000, right? For SonarQube, port 9000. So we'll be installing with a script. So let's see the script we have. Should have it open here. So this is the script. I'll share the link in the description, right? So I want to copy this script. It's a switch case. It's a switch case script. So I want to VI into a file. I want to VI into a file called install SonarQube.sh. Install SonarQube.sh. I want to say want to insert. So I paste this. So let's quickly look at the script. So this is an installation script, and it's based on switch cases. The $1 arguments used are manage, install, and launch. So we should follow this order, right? When trying to run the script, manage, install, and launch. Those are the arguments, right, that we specified. So manage, create, okay. Let's modify the switch. Okay. So manage creates Sonar, right? It will create a user called Sonar. It will assign passwords and it will complete password authentication. That's under the manage module, right? Now, install, the second option that we can pass, we download and install the packages. Then launch, we check, start and check status of SonarQube as a SonarQube user. Okay, so those are basically the things we'll be doing, right? So now let's go through the first option, right? So the first thing is to add user called Sonar, enter a password, and we'll make Sonar a sudoer, right? Then we do password authentication so that Sonar can log in with password. We'll update host name, okay? Then after that, we want to switch to /opt directory where installation will take place. Then we'll install those things that we need to get us going, like unzip, wget, tree, git, and all of that. And we'll install Java, which is a prerequisite, right? We'll install SonarQube proper. We'll unzip it, delete the zip file, rename SonarQube home directory. Then we'll set some permissions for SonarQube, right? Then after that, we'll look at the launch option. So we'll check that SonarQube starts and SonarQube ends. Then we'll also create a soft link, right, for SonarQube. We'll create a soft link so that we don't have to be coming in here every now and then to start and stop. Like, look at this long string, right? You can imagine coming in here to get to sonar.sh before starting, right? Or stopping, when we could create a soft link, right? Create a soft link in the us/usr/bin directory, right? Called sonar.sh. So we can start Sonar from anywhere at any time, right? So that's it. So we have that there. And so basically this is what we'll be doing, right? So I'm sure some people would have installed SonarQube before some updates were done. So if you've done that before, I suggest you run this command, so that you'll be able to run Sonar from anywhere in your environment, right? So you want to run this command that I highlighted to make soft link, right? So now, let's not bother much on that. So let's save. Now let's run this script and see the first option, right? Let's run it without options. Let's see what we'll get. sh, right? So it says the available options are, when you run install SonarQube.sh, you want to pass these options: manage, install, and launch. So I advise we pass these options in this order, right, for the best results. So let's get started. So I want to pass the first argument. I want to manage, right? When I click on manage, it's asking me whether I've created a server with 4 gig memory or more, and I've opened port 9000. So it's yes. So I enter 1. So SonarQube has been added. It's prompting, Sonar has been added as a user. It's prompting me to enter a password. Created a password. Okay. Now, we are done with the first option. So once we look at the second option, right? So let's do this and pass the second option, which is install. To pass the second option, install. So let's go through the installation process. It is important to note that the default login for SonarQube is admin for username and admin for password. Admin, admin. So that's very important to note. Also, let's see how it goes. Okay, so let's pass the third option. Which is launch. That's the third option. Third option is to launch. Okay, let's launch. So SonarQube is running. So what can we do now, right? Remember, let's get the public IP address that we can go to the web server, right? To see SonarQube. SonarQube if config. Remember, we said SonarQube as a web server, right? So this is the public IP address. Want to copy this and go to the browser. Want to specify port 9000. So we'll have SonarQube, all systems operational. Okay, so that's fine. So we've been able to successfully get into the web browser of SonarQube. So what is the next thing we should do? So looking at this now, we want to log in, right? Remember, the login, default login details for SonarQube is admin and admin, right? For security reasons, you will need to, you want to change your password. How do you change your password? Come to administration. But for the purpose of this, session, I will not be changing mine, but just let's see how we go about it. From administration, you go to security, right? We go to users, right? You want to come here and click on change password, then you can change password, right? Specify the old, specify the new. But for the purpose of this training session, I'll not be changing my password, okay? So now, for this administrator, you can see the groups the administrator belongs to, right? So to create users, to do all those fun things, we can do them under the administration tab. Okay, now let's move to what we need to do proper, right? We'll be working with Maven, right? We'll be working with Maven. Do you have any Maven server? Let me see. Maven. Instances. I've terminated all the servers. Okay, what I can do is not going to take time, right? I can do a quick launch of Maven. So this is an opportunity to go through Maven again, right? Maven, let's do a quick launch of Maven, because I'll be working on the project from Maven. So Maven also requires T2 medium. I want to use the same key pair. Okay, Maven does not require any specific port to be open other than the port 22. So I launch my instance. Okay, I launch my instance. I want to quickly do this. Let me copy the public IP address for Maven. Hopefully by the time we are done setting up. But before I do that, I want to rename this tab. Let's call this, that's SonarQube. Right? That's SonarQube. I want to start a new session. Let's do this. Let's specify the okay. Let's copy it again. I'll specify the IP address. EC2-user, because this is a Red Hat server. EC2-user. Okay, EC2-user. And I want to come to use a private key. Use a private key. I want to use this key. And okay. So this is where we are. Yes. Let's clear this and name this Maven, right? This is an opportunity to go through Maven as well. Maven, okay? An opportunity to go through Maven. Okay, so now that we have Maven, installed. So what do we want to do with Maven? So now that we have Maven, what do we want to do? Okay, so we want to get Maven installed, right? So let's look for vi into install underscore maven.sh, right? Vi into a file called install maven.sh. Let's look for a script, right, that we can quickly run to get this up. Okay. For a script, package installation scripts. To have Maven here. So we can use this. Okay. So Maven installation. Right. I to insert. It's Maven installation. So now take note of this part. Right. At the end of the day, when we run this script, we expect that this part, this export part, will be appended to this file, right? But it will not be appended. So we'll need to come back and make some modifications to the .bash_profile file, okay? Then we'll go through this, refreshing, and we'll be up to date. Okay, so let's do this. So now that we have this, we want to save. So let's run the script. It's going to be straightforward. So yes. So while that is running, let's see if we can get busy with something else. Okay, let's look at, go back to the web browser, as SonarQube web browser, okay, and try to get familiar with some of what we have here. So this tab is the project, right? It's for the projects. So any project you are working on, like this one, we want to work on Maven. By the time we run a code quality analysis, it comes here, right? It shows us all these things we should be aware of, right? Like the quality gate, whether it's passed, whether it's failed. Talk about reliability in terms of the bugs, right? In terms of security, that's vulnerability and the rest. Talk about maintainability. Is the code maintainable, right? Are they coded, right? Is it portable, right? You don't want your codes to be you don't want your codes to have hard codes, right? So in terms of coverage, code coverage, right? Anything greater than or equal to 80% is the best, right? As much as possible to achieve the best of code coverage, right? Which is code coverage is calculated as number of unit test cases divided by total lines of code times 100/1. So that gives us the code coverage. So the highest, the better. Okay. So 90%, 95%, if achievable, gives you the best, right? So we want to ensure that there are no duplications, right? Duplications should be less than 3%, right? That's the best of you can have. Then size, right? So these are basically some of the things we'll be looking at, right? So if there are issues, rule sets, you find them here, quality profiles, right? Different quality profiles. So the default quality profile is the SonarWay, right? These are the default quality profiles, right? They are built in, right? So if you create your own quality profile by coming here, you can set yours too, right? Set your quality profile, then decide to set it as default for the project you are working on. So talk about quality gates, right? So these are based on the SonarWay, right? You can see SonarWay quality gates, right? If it's less than 80% code coverage, right? So it won't pass, right? If duplicated lines are greater than 3%, right? It's not a success, right? Maintainability rating, if it's worse than A, it doesn't cut it. Reliability rating, if it's worse than A, it doesn't cut it. Security rating on a new code, if it's worse than A, it doesn't cut it. Okay, now let's go back to Maven. Let's see what we have. Oh, Maven has finished installing. So let's see something, right? Remember, okay, let's go to VI into a file, right? We are in OPT. Let's go home. CD to go home, and let's VI into a file called /opt. Let's VI into a file called .bash, right? It's hidden, right, within the user home, right, directory. So bash underscore profile. So we want to veer into that file called bash underscore profile, .bash underscore profile. So remember what we saw earlier, right? When we're looking at the script, let's just pull it up. Look at the instruction. The instruction was to export this and export something else, but we got this long string, right? So let's look at it in the script. There's the script here. Let's look at it in the script. You see, the instruction was to export this part, right? Export this and append it in the .bash underscore profile file, right? But what was appended? Let's take a look at ourselves, right? So look at what was appended. You can see the long string that was appended. So we want to come here and modify that. We want to modify that. So this is an opportunity to go through Maven again, right? Maven. So we want to delete that line entirely. Then what did we copy? So let's paste it. This is what we expected here. So let's save this. So once we save this, right, you see, although we've done this, but if we come here and check mvn-v, uncheck the version of Maven, see command not found. Why? Well, we've done what we should do, but there's still one more thing left to do, right? If you go check the script, you see one more step, right? We need to refresh the bash underscore profile file, right? So we need to refresh using this command, right? We can copy this and we can decide to come here. Let's copy it. That's an easy thing to do, right? We can copy that and come and run that, right? Source space, since we are at home, we can decide, we can either run this, right? Let me comment this. We can either run this, right? Or we run it like this, because we are already at home, right? You can decide to use the relative part instead of the absolute part. So do this, so it's the same thing. So now if we run mvn, so the first one I decided to put a comment so that it doesn't run, okay? So this is not part of the command. This hash in front is not part of the command. It's just to ensure that we put a comment. So if we run mvn-v, what do we get now? You see, we see the version, right, of Maven that we have installed. So now, if we run mvn commands now, they will work, okay? So now, what do we need to do? We want to look for a web application. Let's look for a web application so that we can clone it, and try to do some fun things here. Let's look for a web application. Okay. See what we have. I see the repositories. Okay. I think we can copy this public. This is a publicly available project. We can copy that. So we want to clone that project. Well, what is the first thing I want to do? This is my own page, right? I want to set up a directory where I do my work, right? I can call this my project. I can make a directory, mkdir projects, right? I want to put my projects here, right? I've created that directory. I want to sit into that project, right? Sit into projects. Now that in project, I want to clone, right? I want to clone, to do a git clone, right? Git clone, right? I want to clone that repository. You can see I'm cloning this repository. So now that I've cloned this repository, I want to, what else do I want to do? Let's ls, let's see what we have. I can do this, ls. So now that I'm here, let me go into that repository. Okay, so let's see what we have in here. We have these two important files. This pump.xml, this is the build script, right? This is the build script. And this is where we have the source code, and we should also have the unit test cases here. This is the directory that contains source code and should also have unit test cases, okay? Now, let's see what we have. What can we do now? Okay, now, let's go back to, let's see what we are doing. So this is our, okay. So right now, we do not have any project at the moment, but we want to set up a project, right? We want to set up a project. So to set up a project, what we need to do is that we need to go to Maven, right? We've gone to Maven, we've cloned a project. Now from Maven, right, where we can do our build, right? We've cloned to Maven, but do we want to do the build right away? Maybe no, yeah, because we want to ensure that what we are building, we want to check for code quality, right? We want to check for code quality. So if we check for code quality, if we do a code quality analysis, right? We check for the code quality analysis and it passes, we can go ahead and do the build. Otherwise, what we want to do is that we want to take the code back to the developers and say, hey guys, so many things are missing, right? You need to work on this. Then they work on it again, recommit it to GitHub, then we can clone it afresh, then do our build, right? But for the purpose of SonarQube, why are we coming to Maven? We are coming to Maven to ensure we have a platform that we can clone from and run our command to do the code quality analysis. And the command is mvn space sonar colon sonar, right? So, but before we start that, there's an important thing we need to do, right? what's the important thing we need to do? We need to go into the pump.xml file that we have here, right? Which is the build script, project object model, right? So .xml file. So we want to go into this file and make some modifications, right? As it affects our, like configuring our SonarQube, so that whenever we run the MVN sonar column sonar, we can have a nice ride, okay? So let's see, what do we need to do? We need to VI into this file, or Vim. We have Vim, there's Vim into pump.xml, right? We want to Vim into pump.xml. And what are we looking for here? We want to look for the tag properties, right? The properties tag, and here it is. Now I want to do some modifications here, right? I want to do some modifications to this. So what do we want to do? We want to come here and set our public, want to set our IP address. So want to set our IP address here and the port number. So what IP address is advisable to use when setting up something like this? It's advisable to use the private IP address because it doesn't change whenever you restart your server, right? So for example, if you had used the public IP address, you need to come back in here and modify it, right? So we just want this to be once and for all. So we'll be choosing to use our private IP address, okay? So let's go to insert mode and let's go look for our private IP address in SonarQube, okay? So our private IP address, we should be able to get it using this, right? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so that's our private IP address. You can copy that, right? Copy the private IP address. Want to come and paste it here. Let's change this to port 9000, right? Because that's the port we have for SonarQube. Okay, did I delete HTTP? HTTP. I think there's HTTP there. Let me just be sure. Since I'm not sure, let me exit without saving. That's the right thing to do. Anytime you are not sure of what you've done, so we don't mess up with the file. So you just exit without saving. Then we can carefully come back here. So we can be sure we are safe, right? So I wasn't sure of the exact, and I didn't want to guess, right? So go to insert mode, change this to 9000, as we did earlier. Then carefully edit this, right? And paste the IP address we copied, okay? So we have this. So this is a safe thing to do. And what is the login for our admin, for our SonarQube? The default login is admin for username and admin for password. Remember, we didn't change our password deliberately. So we can do that here. So once we've done this, we want to save, right? And see the steps we are following. So this is like something we need to do before running our MVN sonar. So now that we are here, so what do we want to do? So we want to run MVN sonar, right? The first sonar here is the plugin, right? The plugins and all of that. First sonar here is a plugin, and the second one that we have here is the goal, right? The goal is to run a code quality analysis and get a report generated for us, okay? So if we run this now, let's see what we have, okay? Okay, let's see what we have. MV and Sonar. So if we didn't set up properly in pom.xml, we will not be able to complete this task, right? So you can see we have a success. So we have a success here. So let's go back to SonarQube and see what we have under projects, right? So the task we did over there, right? What has it resulted in? We have a code quality analysis done, right? Telling us that, oh, there is no bug, right? There is one vulnerability. There are 6 code smells. Code coverage is 0%. What does this mean? 0% code coverage. It means that there's no unit test case written for the project. And that is why, if you look at it, you see that no unit test cases is written. Despite that, there'll be a pass with Maven, right? The Maven test. Maven also has a quality gate. It will pass, right? But here, you can see we have 0%, right? Code coverage. You can see it's showing in red, right? Now, duplication, is there any duplication? No, there's no duplication. So to know, so this is based on the SonarWay quality profile, right? Which expects that code coverage should be 80%, right? We can set our own code coverage. You can set it at 95%, depending on the quality we expect, right? Now, looking at this part, you can see XML, JSP, and Java. What does this tell us? This tells us that the projects that we are looking at are based on all of this, right? You know, the XML file, the pom.xml file, right? The build scripts. You can see they're Java based, right? And GSP. You can see them. So it means the project is based on all of this. So let's click on this. So let's click on this. So this is based on SonarWay, right? Java quality profile is based on SonarWay. You know, we can set our own quality profile and set our own quality gates, right? So you can see code coverage is 0. We expect code coverage to be minimum of 80%, 95%, 98%. The higher, the better, right? So the higher means the better quality, right? The project is, so you can see code coverage. It means there are no unit test cases, right? If you even check on GitHub, there are some notifications at the beginning, right? Right, let's see. What is it? I thought I saw. Just need to be sure I saw something interesting. Okay. Okay. So now that we have this, let's see what else is possible, right? We've seen that we can set our own quality profile, set our own quality gates. You can see this is the analysis. You see, this is based on the SonarWay. Let's see what the quality gate. Let's see the details of the quality gate, right? You can see this quality gate, that's SonarWay quality gate, right? You can see it shows that it is less than this, so it failed, right? It failed in this aspect, right? So it depends on how it is all set up. So we need to look at each of these on an individual basis, right? We need to look at them on an individual basis and see bugs, right? You can see maintainability, you can see duplications, right? But in terms of code coverage, is 0%. So what are you expected to do when you have a report like this, right? Let's say we are sticking to the SonarWay and you have a report like this. What are you expected to do, right? You want to look at this, right? Especially and say, oh, Mr. Developer, there are no unit test cases for this project. You want to give us unit test cases so that we can have a code coverage of 80% or 90% or 95% or whatever we have set for the project, right? So before we can now proceed with building, right, we need to make sure that this part is covered. So basically, this is what we'll be doing. And when the developer recommits the code on Git or GitHub, right, or Bitbucket, so what we'll be doing is we'll now need to run, right, like the code smells, right? If we are not satisfied with this, can also say, oh, Mr. Developer, you need to work on this, right? Look at this. See activities. There's no activity because there's no. Okay, so now that we have this, so once the developer recommits code to GitHub or Bitbucket, right? In our case, for this project, you are using GitHub. So by the time developer commits the codes again, so with unit test cases, then we can run through this process again. And once we are satisfied, we can continue with the build, right? So that will be about all for this session. So see you in another session.